The arena lights cut through cigarette smoke at 9:47 p.m. In exactly 7 seconds, a four-time world champion would feel his knee touch the canvas for the first time in his professional career. Not from a punch, not from a kick, from a single touch. But let's rewind, because what happened in those 7 seconds of the Manila Martial Arts Invitational on September 14th, 1968, would become one of the most debated, whispered, and denied moments in combat sports history. And the man who delivered that touch weighed 63 pounds less than the champion he was about to humble. Manila, Philippines, September 14th, 1968. The Rizal Memorial Coliseum was packed beyond capacity. 3,200 spectators crammed into seats designed for 2,800. Fire marshals had given up. This was Southeast Asia's most prestigious martial arts showcase, and everyone wanted to see the main event. Fernando the Destroyer Reyes was about to defend his heavyweight title for the 9th consecutive time. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall, 218 pounds of muscle built through 12 years of dedicated Kyokushin training. His record was immaculate: 67 victories, 0 defeats, 41 knockouts. He was called the Destroyer for a reason. 3 opponents had retired from martial arts permanently after facing him. One had suffered a broken orbital bone, another a collapsed lung. Fernando didn't just win fights, he ended careers. Tonight's opponent was supposed to be a formality. A lightweight demonstration fighter from Hong Kong who had been added to the card at the last minute when a scheduled challenger withdrew with a shoulder injury. The promoters needed a body, someone to fill the slot, someone expendable. The Hong Kong fighter's name meant nothing to the Manila crowd. They had come to see Fernando destroy someone. They didn't particularly care who. Backstage at approximately 8:30 p.m., Fernando was warming up in his private dressing room when his manager entered with news. The Hong Kong guy wants to talk. Fernando didn't look up from his stretching. About what? Didn't say. He's outside. Send him in. The door opened. A small man entered. He was wearing simple street clothes. Black pants, white shirt, no jewelry, no entourage. He looked like a stagehand, not a fighter. "Mr. Reyes," the small man said. His English was excellent, American accented. "I wanted to introduce myself before we perform tonight." Fernando finally looked up. He studied the man in front of him. Maybe 5 feet 7 inches, 140 pounds at most. The size differential was almost comical. "Perform," Fernando repeated. He smiled. "That's an interesting word choice." The small man's expression didn't change. He seemed neither intimidated nor impressed, just present, observant. "I've seen your fights," the small man continued. "Your technique is excellent, very powerful, very committed." Fernando stood up. At his full height, he towered over his visitor. "Thank you. I've never seen yours. Should I have? Perhaps not. I haven't competed much publicly. I teach. I train actors. I develop my own system." Fernando's smile widened. "Actors." He glanced at his manager. "The Hong Kong guy trains actors." The small man remained perfectly still. "Mr. Reyes, I came to propose something. Tonight, in the ring, I'd like to make a suggestion." Fernando crossed his arms. "I'm listening. Go light. On both sides. We demonstrate technique, not damage. We show the audience something beautiful, not brutal." Fernando stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine, belly-deep laugh. "Beautiful. You wanted to make it beautiful. I want neither of us to be carried out." The laughter stopped. Fernando's face hardened. His pride, his record, his reputation all crystallized into cold offense. "I've never been carried out of anything. And I don't take suggestions from actors' trainers who weigh less than my morning workout." The small man nodded slowly. He didn't argue, didn't defend, just nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "Then I suppose we'll do it your way." He turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused without turning around. "Mr. Reyes," he said, "in my experience, the most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate. Not because he's stronger, because you've already decided how the fight will end." Then he was gone. Fernando stared at the empty doorway. His manager shifted uncomfortably. What was that about? Fernando shook his head. "Nothing. Just a little man with a big philosophy. But something lingered. A feeling Fernando couldn't quite name. The small man hadn't seemed nervous. Hadn't seemed impressed. Hadn't seemed like someone walking into the most one-sided fight of the evening. He had seemed like someone who already knew how it would end. The ring announcer's voice echoed through the Coliseum at 9:43 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, our main event of the evening. In the blue corner, representing Hong Kong, standing 5 feet 7 inches, weighing 140 pounds, martial arts instructor and film coordinator, Bruce Lee. Scattered applause. A few people in the audience recognized the name from television. The Green Hornet had aired briefly in the Philippines. Some remembered Kato. And in the red corner, your undefeated heavyweight champion, standing 6 feet 3 inches, weighing 218 pounds, representing the Philippines and Kyokushin Karate, with a record of 67 victories, 0 defeats, 41 knockouts. Fernando the Destroyer Reyes. The crowd erupted. Fernando raised his arms, soaking in the adulation. This was his city, his arena, his moment. Across the ring, Bruce Lee stood quietly. No posturing, no sowating. He bounced lightly on his feet, staying warm, staying loose. His hands were relaxed at his sides. He watched Fernando with the same patient, observant expression he had worn backstage. The referee called both fighters to the center. Fernando loomed over Bruce like a grizzly over a fox. The visual was almost absurd. Several audience members actually laughed. "I want a clean fight," the referee said. "No strikes to the throat, groin, or spine. Knockdowns are counted to 10. Fighter who cannot continue loses." "Understood." Both men nodded. "Touch gloves and return to your corners." Fernando extended his glove. Bruce touched it lightly. Their eyes met. "I'm going to hurt you," Fernando said quietly. "Not because I have to, because you embarrass me backstage." Bruce's expression didn't change. He said nothing. He returned to his corner. The bell rang at 9:45 p.m. Fernando came forward immediately. His strategy was simple and proven. Close distance, establish dominance, punish. He had ended 41 fights in the first 2 rounds. This one wouldn't take that long. He threw a jab, testing, measuring. Bruce slipped it. The punch passed over his shoulder by less than an inch. Fernando threw another jab, followed by a low kick to the thigh. Classic Kyokushin combination. Bruce wasn't there. He had moved offline, a minimal adjustment that made Fernando's techniques meet empty air. Fernando pressed harder. Combination after combination. Hooks, uppercuts, round kicks, push kicks, everything in his arsenal. Nothing landed. The crowd began to murmur. Fernando was throwing perfect techniques. Powerful, fast, technically flawless. But the small man kept slipping them, redirecting them, flowing around them like water around stone. 30 seconds into the round, Fernando was breathing harder than he should have been. He had thrown perhaps 20 techniques. Not a single one had connected cleanly. Bruce hadn't thrown anything. He was just moving, watching, waiting. "Stand still," Fernando growled. Bruce didn't respond. His eyes never left Fernando's center. His body remained relaxed, mobile, alive. Fernando's frustration boiled over. He had never been made to look foolish. Never had an opponent simply refuse to be hit. His pride demanded contact, demanded dominance. He loaded up a massive right cross, every ounce of his 218 pounds behind it. A knockout punch, a career-ending punch. He threw it. What happened next will be debated for decades. 7 seconds. In the first second, Bruce moved. Not backward. Not away. Into. He stepped inside Fernando's arc, into the space where the punch had no power, where the technique couldn't generate force. In the second second, Bruce's left hand made contact with Fernando's throwing arm. Not a block. Not a strike. A touch. His palm met Fernando's forearm at the exact moment of extension, at the precise angle where the arm was most vulnerable, where a tiny redirection would cascade through the entire body structure. In the third second, Fernando's punch passed harmlessly over Bruce's shoulder, but his body was no longer under his control. The slight redirection had compromised his balance, his root, his structure. In the 4th second, Bruce's right hand rose. A single finger, the index finger, extended toward Fernando's throat. In the 5th second, the finger stopped, 1 inch from Fernando's Adam's apple. Close enough to feel the body heat. Close enough to count the pulse. In the 6th second, time seemed to stop. 3,200 spectators held their breath. The arena went silent. Fernando stood frozen, his arms still extended from the punch that hadn't landed, a single finger hovering at his throat, his body completely vulnerable. In the 7th second, Fernando's knee touched the canvas. Not from a strike, not from pain, from the sudden, overwhelming realization of what had almost happened, of what could have happened, of how completely he had been controlled. The crowd didn't understand what they were seeing. Fernando hadn't been hit. There was no visible damage. Yet the undefeated champion was kneeling on the canvas, 1 finger hovering at his throat, his eyes wide with something no one had ever seen in them before. Fear. The referee hesitated. This wasn't in the rule book. There was no protocol for a knockdown without contact, no precedent for a fighter kneeling before a finger. Bruce stepped back, slowly, deliberately. He lowered his hand and returned to a neutral stance. His expression hadn't changed. He looked exactly as he had when he entered the ring. Calm, patient, present. The referee began counting. 1, 2, 3. Fernando stayed down. Not because he couldn't rise, because he was processing, understanding. In 7 seconds, every belief he had held about fighting, about power, about martial arts had been dismantled. He had thrown his best technique at a man half his size and had ended up on his knees with a finger at his throat. 4, 5, 6. Fernando looked up at Bruce. Their eyes met. Bruce nodded once. A small gesture, almost imperceptible, but its meaning was clear. Get up, continue, or don't. The choice is yours. 7, 8. Fernando rose. The crowd exhaled, cheered. Their champion was back on his feet. The fight would continue, but everyone in that arena knew something had changed. The atmosphere was different. The energy was different. Fernando was different. He raised his hands, assumed his fighting stance, but his movements were cautious now, respectful. The wild aggression was gone. Bruce circled slowly, still not attacking, still waiting. Fernando threw a kick. Tentative. Testing. Bruce redirected it with a brush of his forearm, turning Fernando slightly off axis. Fernando threw a punch. Careful. Measured. Bruce slipped it, touched Fernando's wrist, demonstrated control without exploiting it. This went on for another minute. Fernando attacking. Bruce defending. Neither landing anything significant. But the dynamic was clear. Fernando was the aggressor. Bruce was the controller. Fernando was fighting. Bruce was teaching. At the 2-minute mark, Fernando stopped. He stood in the center of the ring, hands at his sides, breathing hard. Not from exertion, from something else. From the weight of understanding. The referee approached. You want to continue? Fernando looked at Bruce for a long moment. Then he did something no one in that arena had ever seen him do. Something that would be remembered and retold for decades. He bowed. A formal bow. Deep and respectful. The bow of a student to a teacher. The bow of someone who has learned. Bruce returned the bow. Equal in depth. Equal in respect. Fernando turned to the referee. I concede. The crowd erupted. Not in anger. In confusion. In amazement. The undefeated champion had just conceded to a man who hadn't thrown a single offensive technique. The ring announcer struggled to find words. Ladies and gentlemen, by concession, your winner, Bruce Lee. Scattered applause. Many in the audience didn't understand what they had witnessed. They had come for violence, for knockouts, for the destroyer living up to his name. They had gotten something else entirely, something they couldn't quite name. In the quiet moments after, backstage, away from the cameras and the crowd, Fernando found Bruce in a corridor near the exit. Bruce was carrying a small bag. He looked ready to leave. Mr. Lee. Bruce stopped, turned. Fernando approached. The two men stood facing each other in the dim corridor light. Fernando, still in his fight gear. Bruce in the same simple clothes he had arrived in. What you did out there, Fernando said. His voice was different now. Quiet. Searching. That wasn't fighting. No, Bruce agreed. It wasn't. Then what was it? Bruce considered the question. A lesson, he said finally. Well, I didn't want to give. But one you insisted on receiving. Fernando nodded slowly. The finger in my throat. You could have. Yes. But you didn't. No. Why? Bruce looked at Fernando for a long moment. Because real martial arts isn't about destruction, he said. It's about understanding. The highest level isn't killing. It's choosing not to. It's showing your opponent what you could do, then giving them the chance to become better. Fernando's eyes glistened. 67 fights. 41 knockouts. 3 careers ended. He had built his identity on destruction, on dominance. And in 7 seconds, a man 63 pounds lighter had shown him another way. What do I do now? Fernando asked. His voice was barely a whisper. How do I go back to what I was? Bruce smiled. The first genuine smile Fernando had seen from him. You don't, Bruce said. You go forward. You take what you've learned and you become something new. He reached into his bag and withdrew something small. A business card. Simple. Black text on white paper. If you want to understand, Bruce said, come find me. He handed the card to Fernando. Then he walked away. Down the corridor. Through the exit. Into the Manila night. Fernando stood alone in the dim light. Holding a business card. Holding the weight of everything he had believed and everything he now questioned. The business card read simply, Bruce Lee. Los Angeles. No title. No credencials. No rank. Just a name. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Fernando Reyes never competed professionally again. He retired 3 weeks after the Manila fight, citing personal reasons. The media speculated about injuries, about scandals, about secret payments. The truth was simpler and more profound. He had seen something in that ring, felt something. A level of martial arts that made his 67 victories seem like child's play. A demonstration of control so complete that all his power, all his technique, all his years of training had been rendered meaningless in 7 seconds. He couldn't go back to what he was. Bruce Lee had been right about that. So he went forward. In November 1968, Fernando arrived in Los Angeles. He found the address on the business card, a modest training facility in Chinatown. No fancy sign. No tournament trophies on display. Just a door and a small placard. He entered. Bruce was teaching a class. For students. They were working on something Fernando didn't recognize. A flowing exercise involving 2 people touching hands, pushing, yielding, redirecting. Bruce saw him enter. Their eyes met across the room. You came, Bruce said. Fernando nodded. I needed to understand. Bruce dismissed his students for a break. He approached Fernando. The same patient, observant expression. The same calm presence. What do you want to learn? Bruce asked. Fernando thought about the question. Really thought about it. In Manila, he said slowly, you could have killed me. With 1 finger. But you didn't. I want to learn how to choose. How to have that kind of control. That kind of restraint. Bruce studied him. That's not technique, he said. That's philosophy. Then teach me both. Bruce nodded slowly. A decision forming. Okay, he said. But you have to start over. Everything you know about fighting. Everything you believe about power. It has to go. Fernando looked at his hands. Hands that had ended careers. Broken bones. Caused pain. I'm ready, he said. He wasn't. Not yet. No one ever is. But he began. For the next 3 years, Fernando Reyes trained with Bruce Lee. He unlearned Kyokushin. He learned Wing Chun principles. He studied Jeet Kune Do philosophy. He discovered that true power isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you can control. He never competed again. Instead, he returned to the Philippines in 1972 and opened a small school. He taught a different kind of martial arts. Not about knockouts. Not about domination. About understanding. About growth. About the choice to not harm when harming is possible. He told his students about Manila. About the 7 seconds that changed his life. About the finger that stopped an inch from his throat and the lesson that started there. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The 3,200 people who witnessed the Manila fight told different versions of what happened. Some said Bruce Lee had used secret pressure points. Others claimed Fernando had thrown the fight for money. A few insisted the whole thing had been staged. No official footage survived. The arena's recording equipment had malfunctioned that night. A coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps some moments aren't meant to be captured. Only remembered. Only passed down. Only kept alive through the telling. What remains is the lesson. Real power isn't measured in knockouts. It's measured in restraint. Real victory isn't dominating your opponent. It's giving them the chance to become something greater. Real martial arts isn't about destroying. It's about choosing not to destroy when destruction is within your reach. 7 seconds. 1 touch. 0 strikes landed. 1 life transformed. September 14th, 1968. Rizal Memorial Coliseum, Manila. The night the destroyer learned that true strength doesn't destroy. It builds. And somewhere in the foundation of every martial arts school that teaches control over carnage, restraint over rage, understanding over annihilation, the echo of that lesson remains. Not a punch, not a kick, not a knockout. A single finger stopping 1 inch short, and a champion on his knees, learning what power really means. 3,200 witnesses. One who learned, one who taught, and a story that will never stop being told. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes.